Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Three minutes after 11 is the time, and we live in a world where at the moment religious division and religious disagreement appears to be causing more problems than it has for a couple of hundred years. You could, I think, probably get away with the argument that we're suffering more religious-based division at the moment than at any point since the Enlightenment, certainly in our corners of the world. So when the Prime Minister announces later today that she is going to remove a restriction, a ban on Catholic churches and other faiths from opening new free schools or academies which can select children entirely on the basis of faith, I worry that she will be increasing that problem entirely on the basis of faith. How can this be a good thing? In fact, I wondered whether we needed to wait until the speech had actually been given. Is this embargoed? I can't read this out yet, can I? I've got the speech in front of me. How politics works, chapter 17 and a half. How much trouble would we get in if we started reading it out now? Caroline says quite a bit, but she's looking scared now. Seriously, proper scared. She's thinking, why did I give him the speech? Okay, all right. The sound of me folding it up and deciding not to break sort of prime ministerial embargoes. I however, feel that we do not need more faith schools. I have a bit of a problem with this one. This is where I understand that UKIP policy about slaughter. You know, do you remember that when the UKIP agricultural spokesman sort of got caught saying, oh, look, we're going to ban ritual slaughter, and he said to some Jewish voters, we're really sorry, you're collateral damage. This wasn't designed to affect you, it's the Muslims. So it was just an admission that this has absolutely nothing to do with the animals. It's just going to really upset Muslims, which is why it's a UKIP policy. But unfortunately, it's going to affect Jewish people as well. So that's why the halal debate often gets scuppered when people bring in kosher, because at the moment we're going through an Islamophobic phase in this country rather than an anti-Semitic one. Of course, what people like me recognise, and most of my listeners, is that they're the same thing, just different targets. And that's what I have to do now, because for me, the problem with faith schools is not caused by Catholic primary schools like the one my children go to. The problem that faith schools present is one that's caused by the type of schools my children don't go to, the type of schools where you are allowed as a Jewish school in North London to send a letter out saying mums are no longer allowed. We do not want mums to drop their kids off in cars. And then, of course, we've got the problems from the Midlands with the schools down there. There's sort of borderline madrasas where we were learning about Ofsted reports detailing all sorts of abuses, female teachers being spoken to inappropriately. There was fears that sort of almost fundamentalist approaches to religion were being taught, and that makes my blood boil. It makes my skin crawl. Both of those examples do. But you can only get away with that if you can be 100% selective. So I am going to presume that, and she's started delivering her speech now, so I will be able to tell you what she says about faith schools imminently. I am going to presume that I'm missing the point on this. I'm going to presume that there is something in Theresa May's thinking that I just can't see. The way that the law stands at the moment is pretty clear. If a faith-designated free school, so a new school founded by the local community, if it has more applicants than places, if it is, in other words, oversubscribed, you still with me at the back? Then it has to limit the number of pupils it selects on the basis of faith to 50%. So if you and me set up a school for the Zoroastrian Church of whatever, or for the Church of Jimism, I'm keep meaning, as soon as one of these days I'm going to get around to starting my cult. I'm such an expert on personality cults now, having watched Farage and Trump. I reckon I could set up an even better one. So when I set up the cult of Jimism and we decide to start a faith school, I at the moment, sadly, if it's oversubscribed, I can only have 50% Jimists in my school, and I have to have another 50% of splitters and non-believers, agnostics, Jews, Muslims, Christians, Buddhists. I don't want any of them. I only want Jimists. I want peak Jimism in my school, 100% Jimism. Theresa May's going to let me set that up. So if I'm teaching in my school that gymism is the only way forward, anyone who's not a gymist is going to go straight to hell and burn in the eternal fires of damnation for, well, they're eternal fires, so you can fill in the gaps yourself. You're going to burn forever. That you're dirty, you dirty non-gymists. Anyone who's not a gymist is disgusting. And now, obviously, Ofsted is going to have some powers to make sure I'm not allowed to teach your children that they're the only people on the planet that God cares about and everybody else is a dirty infidel. I'm not going to be able to do that because Ofsted will keep an eye on it. But it's going to be a hell of a lot easier to duck that sort of scrutiny if everybody in the school is already a gymist with a gymist mum and dad at home. So the idea, I must be missing something here. I look forward to finding out what it is. Maybe you can tell me. 0345 6060973. The intention, apparently, is to improve the diversity of the school's intake. That's the intention of the current practice. And we will learn later that the Prime Minister doesn't believe it's having much impact on Jewish, Muslim, Sikh and Hindu schools because parents of other faiths don't want to go there. So there is some sort of logic behind what she's saying, and we'll look at it. But I have never attended a school that wasn't a faith school. I've just realised I went to a convent school and then I went to a prep school that was Catholic, very Catholic, with close links to the local church. And then I went to a monastic boarding school in North Yorkshire. So every school I've ever been to was a faith school. And I don't think it's played much of a part in my worldview, although I can get a little bit moralistic. And it took me a few years after leaving to shed some of the sort of lazy sexism that comes with paternalistic faiths. Most of the Abrahamic faiths, actually, you could argue, discriminate in some ways against women. So you get on with it. You learn to move forward. I had a Hindu kid in my class at school. That it wasn't 100%. If it's 100%, surely it's a disaster. Reassure me that it isn't. 0345 6060973. And what if you get some sort of headbanger who thinks the Book of Leviticus still matters, or someone who is using their Islamic faith to cloud their homophobia, or somebody there's a Jewish preacher who they're trying to keep out of the country at the moment who's preaching that Down syndrome and autism and other things like that are punishments for a sin committed in a previous life, which is just to be equal opportunities. That's a little bit Glenn Hoddle, isn't it? That's what Glenn Hoddle used to say as a result of the evangelical Christianity that he was practicing at the time. So surely everybody can see that 100% selection is scary. Apparently Theresa May can't. 0345 6060973. And it's a dead cat. So a lot of you have not only scurried to my rescue at forgetting what that figure of speech was, but also endorsed my suggestion that grammar schools are just a massive dead cat that Theresa May's thrown into the middle of the room to stop us all pointing out that nobody knows what they voted. Nobody knows what Brexit is. Nobody knows what it's going to look like. Nobody's got a clue. The three ministers she's appointed to deal with it have already proven themselves to be even more ignorant about what it means than most of the country, or at least most of the commentariat. David Davis, under the impression that he could start negotiating with other countries as soon as the vote was in, didn't realise you can't start negotiating while you're a member of the EU. That actually breaks the rules. Liam Fox saying that he's going to do this and do that, and then Theresa May having to turn around and say, no, you're not. David Davis saying that we're probably going to leave the single market. Theresa May turning around and saying, shut up. Nobody's got a clue. Everyone's going to notice. People are going to start getting cross. We need a dead cat. Grammar schools and faith schools. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Roger is in Horsham. Roger, what would you like to say?
Well, James, I would concur with you about the dangers and the possibilities of all kinds of loony sects and cults setting up their own faith schools. Yes. What happens, of course, if you allow just
forgive me for interrupting you, and I know you're going to make a very serious point, but Gymism, the cult I'm poised to set up when I get bored of broadcasting, is not loony, Roger.
Right.
No, carry on.
You see, if the state is going to set up or allow people to set up faith schools, they've got to decide criteria as to what is a legitimate faith. When does it slide into a cult? I mean, would you have schools, therefore, for devil worshippers or worshippers of the Holy Rock? That's the first point. Yeah. More importantly, I do think that all this presupposes something which I think is quite false, and that is that parents have legitimate rights to determine the education of their children. The state has an interest in the education of children. Children have an interest in their education, and parents, of course, do. But apart from parental duties to see to the children's security and affection, they also have a duty to see that they receive an education that's at least not incompatible with their future autonomy. Now, children have got to be liberated from the present in particular. They've got to have a whole array of options before them about what religion they pursue, what career they pursue, what their sexuality they adopt, and so on. And they should not be intentionally foreclosed, or intentionally or unintentionally foreclosed. A child has a right to an open future. And what worries me about faith schools is that if you're surrounded by other children and other teachers and other images and prayers and so on and so forth, you will find it that little bit more difficult. You've got to be very brave at 7.5 to say, look, I don't accept any of this when all your peers are accepting it. So that's the first worry. The second worry is the problem about social cohesion. You know, you've seen the dangers in Northern Ireland, you saw the dangers in Bradford a few years ago. If we want children to grow up to realise that, you know, each one, irrespective of skin colour, race, religion, sexuality, is as important as anyone else, then you've got to educate them together. You would not tolerate, presumably, and presumably the advocates who are going to probably ring you today advocating faith schools...
I don't know, actually.
...the political schools, like communist schools and socialist schools. Yeah. But they're parental values as well.
Absolutely.
Why does a child
vegetarian
have to be brought up by in accordance with parental religious values?
You're probably pushing the debate a little further than it needs to be pushed at this point in proceedings. I agree with every single thing you've said, and the only thing I can't accommodate is the hypocrisy I have now, because the faith school that I went to, the faith school that my children go to, doesn't admit really any, or I'll allow myself a many of the problems that you describe. But that's the nature of politics. To get rid of the problems you describe, you also have to get rid of the schools that fall under the same description, that are faith schools, but aren't propagating or promulgating any of the problems that you mention.
Yes, I think that's probably correct.
And that's a shame. That's a shame. My kids' school is great. It's brilliant.
What I think is, if May is going to introduce faith schools, but only private, this is compounding the problem, because this raises another problem as to whether parents have a right to private education, which I would want to argue against. But because I'm against this notion of parents' rights, I believe in parental duty. And I think if you dispense with the whole idea of parental rights and replace it with parental privilege and parental duties, this doesn't undermine the importance of legitimate parental authority, nor does it underestimate the extent to which parents should be allowed considerable discretion as to how they carry out their duties. But parental discretion ends at the point where a child is in danger of being harmed, or is a threat to its autonomy, either intellectual or emotional. And I think faith schools are profoundly damaging in that respect.
And just because some of them aren't, doesn't mean that your point is in any way diluted, that the principle of a faith school has to... So what do you think she's playing at then, Roger? I mean, very briefly, I'm already late for the travel news. Surely what you've just said is self-evident to everybody, future callers notwithstanding.
It's a wider agenda of, parental choice and probably, denationalising education.
Denationalising education.
Thatcher paradoxically nationalised education, denationalised everything else, and then took the state over.
There's a lot of Thatcherite paradoxes around.
There's a backlash against this.
I hear you.
We need to hand it over to parents.
I'm sorry to talk over you. I've got to crack on with the travel news, Roger. You're very well informed. There's a lot of Thatcherite paradoxes around at the moment. She, of course, was pretty much the architect of the European single market that it appears Brexit might see us marching out of.
Time now is 20 minutes after 11. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, wondering quite what the Prime Minister is playing at when she, calls today for 100% selection to be allowed in faith schools. It just seems to me to be a recipe for disaster. Why would you want to send your children to a school that didn't admit any children from other faiths? 0345 6060 973. I've got a couple of phone lines through. It's gone education crazy at the moment, but I suppose it's like the planets have aligned, isn't it? Theresa May's thrown this dead cat into the middle of the room so that we all stop talking about Brexit. It's worked. Guilty. I'm slightly bored of talking about Brexit. What I find odd about the Brexit conversation is that the people who won are angrier than the people who lost. There's so much fury out there that anybody dares to suggest that it might still be worth wondering what happens next. But anyway, we won't do that now. We're talking about the dead cat, the grammar school dead cat, and now the faith school dead cat. The faith school dead cat is particularly huge. Catholic schools apparently suffer more than others. If it's oversubscribed, you've got to limit the number of pupils selected on the basis of faith to 50%. I quite like that fact. The idea of why would you want your child, unless you're weird on issues like sex education or homosexuality or, misogyny, actually, unless you want to send your children to a school that actively discriminates against girls, why would you want a 100% faith school? What is it that we're missing, those of us troubled by this? 0345 606973 is the number that you need. Sarah is in London. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello there, James.
Hi, Sarah.
Good morning. It's the first time I've ever called in, so I'm a little bit nervous.
You're very welcome.
I'm also nervous because I have to keep watching outside in case my husband comes back. The background is that I was brought up as a Jehovah's Witness. I've been baptised as one,
Yes.
which means I can be disfellowshipped, probably for making this phone call. My husband...
You can be
is a
what?
Jehovah's
Sorry,
Witness.
Sarah. You can be what for making this phone call?
I can probably be disfellowshipped because I would have
Disfellowshipped.
committed,
Right.
yes,
Okay.
I will have committed an act that they can do me for, if you like.
Just by talking to me.
And what I'm going to say, yes.
Okay.
My husband is a Jehovah's Witness. My in-laws are Jehovah's Witnesses. My mother is one. My sisters are one. I'm the only one that's out.
Right.
My sister, she has a 12-year-old and a nearly 14-year-old. They're really bright kids. They could have a great future.
Yes.
But this summer she's decided to rip them out of school because of what's going on in school, according to her. There is the sex education. There's homosexuality. The children have told them that they see smoking, they see drug use, and so they've decided that they will rip the kids out of school for that because they don't want them associating with the world. That's what you call everybody else who's not a Jehovah's Witness. You're in the world.
Yes.
So I disagreed with this. I spoke to my other sister about this, and we sort of had an argument because I was saying that to isolate them, it's not good for them. Ripping them away from the world, as they put it, isn't going to do them any good. It's just not. Isolation.
Where will they go instead?
Well, they're going to be homeschooled.
Oh, Lord.
My
Pardon the
sister,
pun.
she's not a teacher. She's not a teacher. Her husband is not a teacher. I worry about them doing their SATs exams and their
Of course you do.
GCSEs because
Of course you
they
do.
have no formal teaching experience. They've never done it before. They're just worried that they will be associating, as they put it, with people that don't think like them. So, as you can see, because I've said this now, and I've said it out loud to
Yes.
someone, that I could, if someone discovers who I am, and I get reported, then I will have committed an actionable offence. So this is why my husband's gone out now.
I hear you, and I mean, crikey, it's an ostensibly Christian religion that you describe,
Yeah.
and yet you feel frightened of talking to another Christian, actually, just frightened of talking to another
They don't-
person about
they don't
education
see it
policy.
like that.
No, I know they don't. I went out with a Jehovah's Witness, believe it or not, many years
Did
ago.
you?
Yeah, very briefly. Her family weren't keen, Sarah. I can tell you that for nothing. She's a famous actress.
I bet
now.
they weren't.
She's a famous actress now, but I won't give you any more details.
Okay, But it's the kids that I feel sorry for. They're so bright, and actually, there are a lot of things in the religion that stand you well. I mean, the kids, they give like mini talks at the hall. They are so good at public speaking.
Oh, no.
I was good at public speaking, if you excuse my nerves now.
You're doing brilliant.
But I got that because I used to give talks on the platform. I could do that. Those kids are so bright, and I feel so sorry for them.
They're about to be locked in a dark room, aren't they?
They are.
Intellectually
There is
speaking.
no hope. When I was in, I was very good at school. Not blowing my own trumpet,
No, sure.
but I did well. I managed to stay on at sixth form, which was a bit of a rarity. I got four A levels. I got all the O levels at the time. I was offered a university place, but I couldn't do it.
And I can't shake the notion, and I think this is why you've rung me today, despite the risks, that the idea of allowing schools to be set up by faiths, whether Jehovah's Witness or anything else, and to exclude everybody else from those schools is going to create the kind of scenarios that you are describing, and yet they're going to be validated by government rather than at the moment involving opting out of the mainstream and hoping that you don't get caught almost, because Ofsted needs to approve homeschooling. It may well be that your sister doesn't have the nous or the qualifications to be allowed to do it, but we're moving in the opposite direction. We're almost going to create entire schools for people like your sister.
You're exactly right.
Oh,
and
Lord.
with my sister, because their family, they're quite a prominent family, they've copied someone else who's doing it, who's copied someone else who's
And that's
doing
how
it.
these things
And
work.
for me, the logical next step is for them all to club together and form a school.
And that today it looks like they're getting an invitation. It looks today as if they're perhaps, and we'll catch up with Theo Osherwood, who's following the speech, so that we don't have to find out whether or not that is the invitation that Theresa May seems to be issuing to them. And if you tie this point with the one Roger made in the earlier caller, that who gets to decide what is a faith and what is not a faith?
And I know that Jehovah's Witnesses, the conversation has been about Catholics, Sikhs, Hindus, Muslims, but I know that Jehovah's Witnesses, they aren't prominent up there. When you think of religions, you don't automatically think
Sure.
of them. But that fear for me is
Well, I can tell
palpable.
this.
I feel so sorry for the kids, because my sister's thinking that, oh no, we'll teach them, the boy, we can teach him woodwork and we can teach him how to weld, because their grandfather, who's had a stroke, by the way, will teach the son how to do welding, because that's something you can actually do. You no longer need to learn about maths and history.
Biology.
You learn about what we want you to learn. And I think that that's so negative and it's so restricting. But I can't say any of this to them because they won't want to hear it. It'll end up in an argument.
And I understand your frustration, and you're a great aunt, and the fact that they've got you in their life to keep an eye on things and try to keep your own counsel is something of a silver lining to the cloud you describe. I know.
During conversations with the whole family, when they're homophobic conversations, I can't say anything. I have to be quiet. Political conversations, I can't have any, even though I've joined the Labour Party.
Yes.
None of my family will ever know, because if it gets out, I will probably be disfellowshipped.
I just want to clarify what disfellowship means, because a lot of people won't know. It means that every single Jehovah's Witness sends you to
Yes.
Coventry. Every single one,
Yeah.
as a testament of their faith. They would not be allowed to talk to you.
Yes. Yeah, my mother my mother probably
Secretly.
would talk to me, yes. It would have to be secretly, but in public, no one would look at me. All the people that I grew up with, they couldn't talk to me. It is...
Well,
it is a horrible
you have
situation.
shone a light into something that I suspect this proposal today by Theresa May will move towards keeping it in the darkness. I just want to run something by you, Sarah, if I may. I'm a little late for the news.
Okay.
Normally, when I take a call as brilliant as yours, we clip it and we put it out on social media. I'm not going to do that with yours, all right?
Okay.
Because I don't want it sort of going viral and sweeping around the country, or anyone else
Yeah.
possibly speculating about who you are.
Someone will recognise my voice, probably.
Well, no, because you've very, very cunningly hidden your West Indian accent during the course of this conversation, so no one will actually...
did you know?
It was the way you said beer can. Sarah, thank you very much indeed for the call, and what a call. But that's why this seems like such a strange idea.
The number you need to join in is 0345 6060 just a sort of by way of encouragement to a recent caller. This is from Helen. What an extraordinary lady. Thank you for giving her the space to talk. And what amazing radio. I'm trying to work out whether you've just blown her cover with the West Indian thing or double bluffed. That was quite a moment, and a lot of love going out towards that corner of London. 26 minutes to 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien, puzzling over why Theresa May would seek to bring in not just more faith schools, but faith schools that don't have to let anybody else in. I mean, given the nature of the problems that the country faces at the moment, specifically with radicalised Muslim people, the idea of a school where you don't get the light shone in from other worldviews, other ideologies, other faiths is nuts. I could live with the abolition of all faith schools, even though I know it would mean the closure of a lot of, or the change to a lot of very good schools like the one my daughters go to. It'd be heartbreaking to think that they couldn't continue, but why would it change if it ceased to be a faith school? That's the second part of the question for the second half of this programme, the second half of this hour. Why are faith schools? Because one of the reasons Theresa May will give or has given for opening more of them is that they routinely do very, very well in terms of exam results, in terms of the quality of the education that the children receive. They routinely are rated as good or outstanding by Ofsted more than other schools. So this is a nice way to include people like me who recognise that they're probably not a great force for good in some cases, but the schools we went to or the schools our children go to are lovely. Why are faith schools routinely getting better results than non-faith schools? I just take any answer you've got to that. I'm not sure I've ever given it any thought. 0345 60 60973 is the number you need. Lucy is in Harrow. Lucy, what would you like to say?
Well, I think I agree with you on the fact that I could be happy with the abolition of all faith schools. I went to a Church of England lower school because we were in Bedfordshire, so it's 3-tier. And despite the fact my family aren't religious, my dad was brought up Catholic, but sort of abandoned it quite a young age. My mum's probably what you might refer to as a census Christian.
Yes.
But we weren't a religious family, and that was the case with most families at the school. And it was a great school. But I remember, you had to pray however many times a day. You had to say grace before you ate your lunch. But that wasn't really, I didn't take much from that.
So you're describing what I described, a faith school that doesn't appear to do any harm, really, to the people in it or to society at large, and possibly it's a baby in bathwater thing. That's what we would lose in order to close down the possibility of other faith schools. And some of them might be Christian. There's creationism, there's problems with sexual education, problems with homosexuality. A Jehovah's Witness school, to refer back to the last caller, might pose some problems, but also in the Jewish faith and the Muslim faith, there are schools we know of that exist that are propagating very, very unhealthy and very, very unmodern attitudes. Why do you think the Prime Minister wants more?
I couldn't possibly answer that question.
But that's incredible.
The one thing I really don't understand, obviously, the smaller schools that, as you say, faith schools that don't, they wouldn't necessarily. They don't necessarily sort of defined by being a faith school. Yes, we'd lose out on those.
Yeah.
But I think the thing is that then by losing out on some of those schools, we deal with the problem on the more extreme end of the scale.
No, but the schools like mine and yours would still be there. They just wouldn't be faith schools anymore. That's why I want to know why they routinely do better. I don't know why would a Catholic school or a C of E school do better than a school with exactly the same children in it, but without a priest coming in every Friday or a vicar taking prayers every assembly. Thank you, Lucy. This really, really intrigues me. And now she's just said. I'm looking at the speech as it unfolds. Now she's just said that she wants to create a society in which everybody has an equal chance. Now faith schools surely are the polar opposite of a society in which everybody has an equal chance. It's a door you can only go through if your parents are either of a certain faith or doing a good job of pretending to be. It's very strange. John is in Bristol to just clear the whole thing up for us, John, in 3.5 seconds flat. Carry on.
Okay, James, hi. Yeah, first of all, that's caller, the Jehovah's caller earlier was heartbreaking and depressing.
Yes.
And it makes me angry, stories like that.
And me as
Quite
well.
frankly, let me make my position clear. I have no truck with any religion. First of all, faith schools are a nonsense. They should not exist. Schools should be teaching children, young people, evidence-based facts and science and history. Yeah, not a bunch of supernatural fairy stories and fables written by a bunch of beardy old stoners thousands of years ago. And what Theresa May is proposing is insane and frightening and insidious, and we're going backwards. This is ridiculous.
I mean, obviously, I recognise the force of what you say, and I'm not here to bang a drum for mild religiosity or for the benefits of faith, or simply of praying and taking a little bit of time, in the case of Christianity, which is the faith I know best, to look at some of the teachings there and see them as quite a good mode for life without necessarily having to buy into all of the stuff that you describe in such poetic fashion. But you can do all of that at home.
Yes, of course you can, and you can do that without teaching, like, virgin births and Adam and Eve and, creationism as fact. I mean, this is dangerous nonsense and it's tantamount to child abuse, quite frankly. And what that lady was saying about
slow down a minute.
That proves the point. That's abuse.
John, you've got to stop talking now.
To those kids, it's abuse.
You've got to stop talking now. Okay, I've been dealing recently with a lot of children who are victims of child abuse, and teaching children that God exists is not the same at all. So
it's psychological abuse.
Oh,
What
shut
her
up, you
sister
silly
is
man.
doing.
20 minutes to 12 is the time. And that's a sign of a fundamentalist atheist, you see. So if you've got him running a school and he's saying that all the kids over the road at the Catholic school are being abused, then you get a flavour of how you can have cretins on both sides of this argument. Tanya's in Staines. Tanya, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I really think I've completely nailed this on the question that you asked.
Hang on, I'm the arrogant one here who thinks he's got the answers to everything. You get off my cloud.
Only the answer to this, okay?
All right, then,
Don't panic. You're still in there. You're still up there. So listen, my daughter's a Catholic. I'm not. My husband is. When I married him, I had no idea what a huge advantage this would be, and I never thought I would say that because it really didn't matter to me what religion my husband was. But subsequently, as a result of that, we've been able to send our daughter very, very luckily to, denoted by Ofsted, an outstanding Catholic school. Now, I've noted over the years that it's a thing that I've named the giver stuff factor. I do call it something slightly different off air, but we're on air, so to get your child into that school, you have to toe the line. You have to go to church. You have to fill the forms in. You have to care. You have to give us stuff. And that puts us into the bracket of socially mobile, sharp-elbowed.
Back to grammar schools. God, you're right. You have nailed it.
It ties it in perfectly.
I've got a new studio producer today. I haven't worked with Keith very often, so I don't know if he's got any of my buttons programmed. Can we give Tanya a round of applause, Keith, or am I dropping you in at the deep end on this one? Well played, Tanya. Great stuff. Don't get many of those outside Mystery Hour. So that's why faith schools do better, because, well, that's chicken and egg as well, though, isn't it? Because why were they doing better in the first place to make them a target for the sharp-elbowed parents?
Are you still talking to me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Do you think I was still having a private conversation with Keith?
Sorry, James, I was just floating a little bit high on my applause there. So it's taken me a while to come back down.
Spreading
but hey,
the love.
I got an applause from James O'Brien just before my 50th birthday. That ain't bad going.
It's not. Can only go. It's downhill all the way now for the rest of the day. But just take me to let's go to the chicken and egg thing, because I completely recognise what you described, which is why it got the applause. But how did the school become a target for the aspirational, a target for the sharp-elbowed in the first place? Do you see what I mean?
Okay, well, I guess it was a very gradual process, and that what happened was that people that were not from perhaps Catholic backgrounds or other backgrounds were put their faith quite naturally in the state schools, because that's what the government told us would be great back when they disbanded grammar schools, etc., etc. Yeah. And over a period of time, that has not worked. And gradually, it snowballed. I really think it's that simple. I would be very happy if all, well, not happy, but it wouldn't bother me if all faith schools were disbanded, provided the funds and the effort was put in the comprehensives, which is where it should be. Not creating a system for 20% that do well. The money should be there for all children to do well, and that top 20% should do well in the state school, irrespective if you pass an exam, irrespective if you're Catholic, Hindu, whatever.
But isn't this that you're not going to win any elections by treating everybody the same? You're only going to win an election by convincing people who are going to suffer under an unfair system that somehow they're not. So, I mean, that is British politics in a nutshell at the moment. It's people voting against their own interest because somehow it's needy versus greedy. No one wants to be seen as needy, so they're all siding with the greedy. Most of us live in between the two.
It's absolutely spot on, James, and I think it's lazy politics on Theresa May's part, because what she knows well is that people do want their children to go to grammar schools, and they do want their children to go to faith schools. They can't afford private, so what they'll do is they'll go, oh, great, she's going to create, so my child I might get a chance to, and if we move to this area where there's a good Catholic school, that's why it's easier for her to create more faith schools where the exam results will be better and she can fulfil the ethos that she mentioned earlier, and also create more grammar schools. Again, it's lazy. Why can't we fix what we've got? Why can't we spend money and fix what we've currently got in place, which should work for everyone? It's never going to be perfect.
Well, the answer to this question is that you're legislating for a majority, and politics at the moment, for reasons I don't fully understand, doesn't work like that. We're dealing now with sort of angry. I don't know. Anyway, when's the big day, Tanya?
28th of September.
All right, well.
Which, interestingly, James, it's my daughter's is the 26th of September. She's not 50, obviously. That would be freaky. But
it would be also biologically impossible, I think.
But yeah, you did mention a few years. You mentioned a few years ago that there were so many children around the 20, or so many birthdays around the 25th of September, and you worked it back as to why.
What was it? Christmas?
Nancy was a day overdue, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. I think there you go. You don't need a grammar school education to do those sums. And speaking of education, I'll just clarify this because I don't ordinarily tell callers to shut up. The fellow who was comparing religious education to child abuse. There are many powerful arguments to be made against why children shouldn't be indoctrinated. But if you want to go and find somebody who was raped as a child and tell them that what happened to them was the same as being forced to read the Bible, then you can use the phrase child abuse in the context of education. Happy to clarify, always. Coming up in the next hour, the British mums are the worst in the world for breastfeeding. We have the lowest rate of breastfeeding in the world. And one academic claims today that it's because of the social pressures placed on women. I will get stuck into that story shortly after 12 o'clock, but ideally with your help. And you must remind me to tell you what happened on the tube the other day. Before that, though, we return to the question of faith schools and Theresa May's speech today, which, of course, also addressed the topic we covered in the first hour, grammar schools. LBC's political editor, Theo Usherwood, will join us shortly to talk us through some of the key points of the speech. But first, let's head up to Sheffield. Neil is there. Neil, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi James, you alright?
I'm grand, mate. What's on your mind?
What's on my mind is Theresa May basically contradicting what she's saying. When she's saying that she wants equal opportunities for everybody,
yes,
create these schools so everything's fair, I can tell you from being a Jehovah's Witness and being a Jehovah's Witness that stopped being a Jehovah's Witness, that the idea of that being fair and equal, that religion, is just... well, it's laughable.
Well, and if religions of all colours and complexions are allowed to open their own schools, the problems will increase.
It's dangerous. It's dangerous. I mean, you yourself have said it, and people say it, and it annoys me when people say it, that these religions that seem harmless, like Jehovah's Witness, they're anything but harmless, James. Anything but that. They take kids' minds. They get kids' minds at a young age. When they're taking things in and learning, and when they're learning what's right, what's wrong, that portion of a child's brain that takes everything in, and they dilute. I don't even know what word.
No, I know you're talking about a very traumatic period of your own personal life. I mean that's coming about clearly. And what gave you the strength to leave?
Well, my mum and dad, obviously. They were Jehovah's Witnesses. I think they actually joined when I was about 2 or 3 year old, not from birth.
Right.
Then I was there from 3 year old to probably 14, 15. Like that lady said earlier, I was one of them kids doing talks in front of Kingdom Hall. I was a really good speaker. Baptised, visited assemblies, travelled all the country, going to these conventions. It's your life. It becomes your life. And then my mum and dad, they divorced, they split up, and then all of a sudden they both disfellowshipped. My mum,
because they're not allowed to split up. Is that why? Or
yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're not allowed. You're not allowed to divorce. A divorce is not allowed in their religion. So one of them has to be disfellowshipped. I think they both got disfellowed and ended with my mum first,
right.
And then obviously that meant that everybody that I spoke to, I had Jehovah's Witness friends at school. I had friends in my area. All of us, they can't talk to me. People that I've spoke to, like adults, I'm not talking about kids now, I'm talking adults, 50, 60 year old that have talked to me every day, like they treat you like their own. You're in their house, you're having tea, you go into their house on like social nights, they're like family.
So you started from scratch.
Click of a button, yeah, and then a click of a button, they won't even acknowledge you in the street. And then Theresa May is today telling me and everybody else that that's all right.
Well, she would probably claim that she isn't saying that, but I know, like you, Neil, I find it hard to see how allowing faith schools to open with 100% exclusivity would prevent the people who blanked you in the street from setting up their own school. I just don't. I mean, maybe we need to find out more.